Hello, welcome to another video of Code Snippet. So this is going to be another video inside Spring Security where we are going to look into method security. So in the last video, we have already seen authorization and its implementation. But now we are going to look into method security, and primarily we are going to focus on pre-authorize and post-authorize annotations. So let's get started without wasting any time. This is going to be a fun video, so sit back, relax and enjoy the show. Alright, so let's quickly jump into the agenda of this particular video. So method security in Spring, right? So first we will have a quick glance of what exactly is method security, why it is needed. After that, we will jump into pre-authorize annotations internal working and its implementation, and same with post-authorize annotation. So pre-authorize and post-authorize annotations we are going to look into this particular video. So let's get started with method security. So in the last video, we have seen authorization, right? So this is basically the weather service project that we have been looking into while implementing our security, right? And if we go inside security config, then you will see that we have this particular filter chain over here. And here, if you see, we have this request matchers. So for each get, post and delete request, we are giving the request matcher based on which we are giving the authority. That means if this particular get request have weather read permission, then only allow that. So that is something we have done by using request matchers. But again, as we discussed in the last video, if there are 1000 APIs inside your project, you cannot go ahead and do that over here in the filter chain, right? It will be a lot of tedious thing and a lot of code will be there, right? So what is the alternative? The alternative is method security. That is when method security comes into picture, right? So that is something we are going to implement in this video. So this is something we have seen in the last video. If you are yet to look into that, I will recommend go ahead and check it out. That is the base for this particular video. Now let's go back over here. And if you remember, in the last video, we have seen this authorization architecture, right? We have seen that there is this authorization manager, which have a check method, which will help us to check if the authorization is successful or not. And what it will check this request matchers that we have just seen. But now we don't want this, right? We don't want this request matchers, but we want to achieve the same thing, right? So that is when annotations comes into picture, right? So how we are going to do it? It's pretty simple, right? So we have this weather API. So if I go inside weather controller and let's say we have this get weather, and here what I will do, I will just add pre-authorize annotation. So once we do that, it will just authorize before calling this particular method. So this particular get part, this particular request matcher can be easily replaced with this particular pre-authorize annotation. Now here we need certain parameters and we will come back to it. Before that, let's go over here. And if you see over here, the source of information I'm giving you is basically coming from this particular Spring Security documentation. This is basically official documentation. I will just put the link inside description. You can go ahead and check. Now it is just about adding a annotation, right? Your pre-authorize will work before calling this method, and post-authorize will work after the completion of this particular method, right? It is just about adding a authorization, but how it works internally. So if I go over here, you will see this particular diagram. Now in order to simplify that, I have created this particular diagram over here. So I hope that is visible. So method security, and we are going to look into pre-authorized first, right? So this is our filter chain now, right? This is our filter chain. Now let's say we don't want it here, right? We don't want this request matchers now. So what I will do, I will just comment those out, right? So all these things are not necessary over here. We are directly permitting only authenticate API, and other APIs will be authenticated. This is basically authentication flow. Now what will happen? The request will come to your filter first. Your request will be authenticated by using JWT authentication filter. And once your request is authenticated, your request will go to your respective function, right? Once the authentication is completed. But now this method have a annotation. Which annotation this method have? We have added pre-authorize annotation, let's say. Then because this particular method have pre-authorize annotation, it will be intercepted, right? Intercepted by using Spring AOP. And an interceptor will be invoked before calling this particular method. So once your authorization is complete, before calling this particular method, there will be an interceptor because this particular method have pre-authorize annotation. And that interceptor is basically this guy, authorization manager before method intercept. And what is the job of this guy now? This guy's job is to check the authorization, whatever is present inside that particular pre-authorize annotation, right? So we are yet to give the authorization over here. We will come back to it. Now once this request is intercepted and your interceptor is called, this particular interceptor, What this interceptor will do, this will internally make use of authorization manager, right? The same authorization manager that we have seen in authorization architecture, right? What this authorization manager will do, this will again have a check method, and this will have a specific implementation now. So if you go inside over here, then you will see same thing over here. So let's say we have security filter chain, and after that we have read customer method which have PreAuthorize annotation. It will call this particular interceptor, and this interceptor will make use of authorization manager. And if you remember, authorization manager have multiple implementation. If I go over here into authorization architecture, then you will see that it have multiple implementation, and this particular PreAuthorize authorization manager will come into picture over here. If you remember, we have briefly discussed this in the last video. This particular authorization manager's implementation will be your PreAuthorize authorization manager. So now this authorization manager, that is your PreAuthorize authorization manager, will make use of something called as method security expression handler. So your post authorization method will have some kind of expression in this bracket, right? We will see that in a bit. Now this particular expression will be handled by this guy. So the job of this method security expression handler is to get that particular expression from your PreAuthorize annotation, and based on that expression it will make use of evaluation context, which will have details about your authentication, and it will authorize your request. And once that is authorized, it will come back to your interceptor, and if it is authorized, then we will successfully invoke get whether method. Otherwise we will send the error, that is access denied exception 403, that dude, you are not able to access. So if you go back over here, same thing is given over here, right? So if you see over here, we have this method security expression handler, and we have this evaluation context which have a supplier which is basically authentication object, and based on this guy your request will be authorized. Once it is authorized, it will be successfully invoked, otherwise you will get access denied exception. And same thing they have for authorization. So if you see the below part over here, this particular below part, this below part is for post authorization, right? So above part is for pre-authorization, below part is for post authorization, right? That also we will see in a bit. Now as we understand how pre-authorization works, let's try to implement it quickly, right? Now let's go back over here and let's go to our security config, right? So first thing we need to do over here is, according to documentation, let's go up. First thing we need to do is we need to annotate our configuration class with enable method security annotation, right? What this guy will do, this guy will enable method security annotation for us, right? As the name suggests. So I will go over here and I will add that particular annotation. I will quickly import it. Next thing we will do, so if you see over here, what we had request matches HTTP GET, and for this particular weather API, we had weather read as permission. So what we will do, we will go back over here, and here in the PreAuthorize, in the double quote we will say has authority, and here we will just add weather read. That means before invocation of this method, check if the requested user have authority as weather read. Now if you remember, we have created a couple of users. First user is your admin, right, which have role as admin, and second user is your simple user which have role as user. And if you remember, in the role enum we have assigned the permissions. So admin have weather read, weather write, and weather delete permissions, and your user only have weather read permission. So basically once we add this particular weather read permission inside this controller, both admin and user should be able to access this guy. Now same thing we can do over here in the add weather. So let me just copy this guy. I will just paste it over here. There we go. And now I will say weather write. Now only admin have weather write and your user do not have weather write. So your user should not be able to access the weather write API. And the third one is basically, if we go back to security config, then the third one was related to delete, right? So let's quickly add that as well. I will go to delete API over here, and I will go to delete mapping, delete city, and here I will just add PreAuthorize, and I will say weather delete. Now once we do that, let's try to run our application. So I'll say stop and rerun, and let's try to test it. And let me bring up my Postman real quick. So this is basically our delete API. Before that, let's go to get API. Before that, what we need a token, right? We need a authorization token, and I'm trying to find the API for that. There we go. This is basically our authenticate API. And here what we are passing admin and admin 1234. So this is basically our admin user, right? And what we will do, I will just copy this and I will go back to our get API. So there we go. This is basically our get API. And what I will do, I will just replace this bearer token. And if you see over here, we are getting the respective details. And let's try to add the data now. So we will add the data for, let's say, Manali now. Manali is pretty cold with, let's say, 1 degree Celsius. And what I will do, I will just replace this particular token over here. There we go. And I will quickly try to hit that, which will create this guy for us. Now let's go back to our authenticate API and let's try to create for our user, right? So user and user 1234. Let's try to send it. We got the token. Let's go back to our get API and let's try to fetch the details for Manali now, right? And let me send it. If you see over here, we are getting the respective output, right? No problem. But let's try to create it now. What I will do, I'll just replace the token of the user now. And what I will do, I will just try to add weather for, let's say Kochi. Kochi is again very rainy, right? And it have 12 degrees Celsius. Let's try to send it. If you see over here, we are getting 403 forbidden because our user do not have permission to add. Our user do not really have permission to add the weather right permission is not there, right? So that is how your pre-authorization annotation actually works. Now what we can do, let's quickly have a debug session, right? So what I will do, I will go over here and try to send this request, right? So let me send it, and before that I should unmute all the debug points and let's send it again. So if you see over here, we are in authorization filter, right? So this guy is basically in filter chain, so it will just try to do its work, right? Now we are here in the request matcher delegating authorization manager that we have seen in the last video. But if you see over here in the matcher, it does not have much. Last time we had these 3 matchers, right? 1, 2, 3. But at the moment we don't have any, right? We have this default matcher which is doing nothing, right? So it will just skip that. And if we proceed, let's keep proceeding. And if you see over here, we are in authorization manager before method interceptor, right? And this guy is the exact interceptor that we have seen over here. So if you see that authorization manager before method interceptor is the one that we are seeing over here. Now, if you see over here, this invocation, then if you see that we have this intercepted method, which is basically get weather. So this interceptor is being called before get weather method. After that, if you see over here, we have this matchers, and inside this matchers, you will see a point cut expression. And inside this point cut, if you see over here, then you will see that there is something called as pre-authorize. It should be there, pre-authorize, right? So this is basically point cut for pre-authorize, right? So this is basically the interceptor which is intercepting your request and authorizing stuff for you. Now what it will do, it will just make use of authorization manager. So if we proceed, then you will see that authorization manager is basically pre-authorize authorization manager. Pre-authorize authorization manager, which is basically the implementation of your authorization manager, right? So we have seen that over here as well, right? This pre-authorize authorization manager, or here also we have seen that pre-authorize authorization manager, right? So that is how it is working. Now this guy will authorize the request. If you see over here, it is again making use of check method to check your authorization, and once the authorization is completed, your request will come to get weather controller. So that's basically how it is working. So if you're not aware of how Spring AOP works or how interceptors works, right? I have already created videos on that. You will find those videos in my Spring security playlist. You can go ahead and check them, right? So it's very easy, right? So that is how it is working. And now here in the pre-authorize, we are giving has authority, right? Here we can give roles as well. So instead of has authority, we can just say has role, and we can add respective role over here. For example, let's say user. Or if you have multiple roles, then you can say has any role, and you can add multiple roles over here, which can be separated by comma. That means any user having this role among these 2 roles will be able to get the weather. So again, if we rerun this application, it will just work in a same way. If you see over here, user will be able to get the respective data. So it's about adding whatever you want to add inside your pre-authorize annotation. So that is about your pre-authorize annotation. Pretty simple stuff. So let me go back over here, and we have seen method security, we have seen pre-authorize, we have seen the implementation of that one as well. And post-authorize is again very simple thing, right? So if I go back over here, now before calling get weather, we had this particular interceptor. Now after calling this method also, we can have an interceptor, and that interceptor will be triggered based on what? Post-authorize annotation. So if we go back over here, then as per this diagram, if you see over here, after the execution of read customer, you have authorization manager after method interceptor, and this interceptor will again do the same thing. This interceptor now will call post authorize authorization manager, which again will have method security expression handler, and inside that we have authentication supplier, which will authorize the request and tell this guy if that particular expression is valid or not. And if it is not valid, then we will again still get access denied, otherwise the request will continue processing normally. So instead of this before method interceptor, we will just have after method interceptor in that case. Alright, so let's try to understand post authorize now with an example. Now let's say we have a log, right? Weather log. So I have created a weather log entity over here. It should be here in the entity, right? So we have weather log, right? So we want a functionality. The user who adds the log should only be able to retrieve the log. Again, so user who is going to add the log only should have the ownership of that particular log, and when we get the log from the user, only the log should be returned if that particular user added it. For example, here I have this weather log controller, right? And here what we are doing, we are adding the log inside our application, and while adding, what we are doing, we are just setting the name to it. So if you go inside weather log entity, it has performed by, right? So what we can do, while adding this particular log, we will just add that particular name. Let me restart this particular application and let's see what happens. So the application is started. Let me go back over here and create a admin token. Let me copy it. What I will do, I will try to add one log, right, by using this admin. So I will just replace this. I will just send it. Your log is added. What we are adding, Mumbai, right, and performed by admin. So now here we are storing the user as admin, right? So as the token is of admin. Now if I go back over here to get API and try to invoke it, let me go to authorization and try to replace this token, then I will be able to get it, right? And if I go back over here and get the user token, now copy this guy and try to get this token again, then we will still get it, right? Because we are not adding any authorization yet. But now let's say what I want to do, if admin have added this particular token, then only admin should get it, right? Or if the user have added this token, then only user should get it. So if we want to do something like that, then what we can do, we can make use of pre-authorize annotation. So either we can add it over here or we can add it in the service layer as well. So all these annotation can also be added at the service layer. So what I will do, I will say post authorize, and here what we need to do, we will say the return object. So return object is basically this particular object, weather log dot performed by, this particular weather log have performed by, right? So we are checking if this particular return object dot performed by is equals to authorization dot name. That means whatever the name is there in the authorization user, it should be similar as performed by. If it is not similar, don't return. So now I will just restart this application, and the data should be already there inside the database. So now if I try to access this by using user token, you will see that we are getting 403. So that is basically the use of your post authorize annotation, right? So basically define the ownership of that particular data. So what exactly is happening over here? After the invocation of this method, your interceptor is coming into picture, and that is how your post authorize annotation works. And we have seen the implementation as well. And there are a couple of more annotations. So if you go back over here, then same thing you can achieve by using pre-filter and post-filter as well. Now what is pre-filter? So in this example, if you see, we are accepting these accounts, right? So it's a list of accounts. But what if I want to filter certain accounts? So if owner account matches your logged in user, then only this particular accounts will be allowed. Otherwise it will be removed from this particular object, right? So that is basically the job of pre-filter. And same, you should have something called as post filter as well. Now what post filter will do? Now this method is returning the accounts. So this returning object will be filtered based on this condition. Same thing we have seen by using post authorize, right? But now the question will be, what is the difference between post filter and your post authorization? So as you can see over here, post authorization will actually work on a single object, right? It will decide whether to return this object or not. But what if you have collection? You have 10 objects and you want to filter 5 objects which do not match this condition. That is when you can make use of this post filter. So here only objects which do not match this condition will be removed from this collection. Other objects will be still returned to your user, right? So that is basically the difference between these two. And you can make use of pre and post filters as well in order to filter from your collection. You can make use of those annotations as well. Pretty simple stuff. So that also we have seen pre-filter and post filter. So I will just mark it as done. It is pretty simple and basic stuff, right? It will just work similar to this particular post authorize, but it will just work on collection. So that is basically it for this particular video. So I hope you have clear understanding of what is method security, what is pre-authorize, post authorize, pre-filter and post filter annotations. If you like the video, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to Code Snippet. Share this video with your friends so that they also have idea about method security in Spring. That's it for this video. See you in the next video.